Hi folks, my name is Charles and I'm the host of Go-to-Market Hackers, the show where we go inside the minds of revenue architects, creating systems that deliver winning outcomes. Now, usually in this show, I interview revenue architects that are basically using AI to scale massively and generate outstanding results. But this episode, I'm doing things a little bit different. Instead of a GTM engineer or a revenue architect, I'm interviewing an AI engineer that works at Google. Now, Nathan works at Google, and even though he knows how to code, he fully vibe coded a Slack clone in just 2 weeks without looking at a single line of code or editing the code in any way. Now, I've said this before and I'll say it again. I think vibe coding is completely shifting the go-to-market landscape. It's shifting things both internally in terms of how we build GTM systems that scale, but also shifting things externally in terms of how people buy software and so how we sell to these other audiences in this new world. So in this episode, we'll be diving into vibe coding and we'll be diving into all the key learnings that Nathan learned as he built a complete Slack clone in 2 weeks and how you can replicate it yourself. Nathan, it's really great to have you on the show. Thanks so much for joining. I guess some background, Nathan and I go way back when we were both working at DataGen, an AI company, and Nathan was one of the algorithms engineer who was building some of the really cool tech behind the scenes. So Nathan, great to have you back here and excited about what you're building. So obviously we're going to dive into this cool project that you've been working on. Maybe before that, you can give a little bit of context in terms of your background, what you've been doing throughout your career, where you are now, and then we can take it from there.
Awesome. Yeah, so Charles, I think it's funny that you're interviewing me because you were right at the start of my career, right? We met in my first job. I was a founding engineer at DataGen back when Gen AI still hadn't occurred. We were doing synthetic data, synthetic pictures to train traditional ML. And so what happened to me since, then I moved to make my own company, Ethical AI. It became after like something about boosting survey samples using a machine learning model. And then right in the middle of that startup, the LLM revolution happened and, everything started to shift. And then I left, I think, 2 years after that to Google, where I started to get more experience in the cloud, building all kinds of generative AI products for like big customers. The biggest customers in the cloud, actually, they get some free credits to get like Google engineers to build stuff for them. So I'm one of those engineers that does it for them.
Amazing.
And I've been there 2 years now.
Very cool. So I just want to double click on that last point. Actually, I didn't know that you're like basically special projects with the biggest clients of Google. So does that mean you're probably touching on some very cool projects there that I'm sure you can't talk about, but basically able to play around with AI and implement it with some of the largest customers?
Exactly. You're supposed to use like the Google Stack tool, what's in Google
Of
Cloud, but
course.
also what can be outside to help customers solve stuff they can't solve with their own engineers. And so they pay a premium for this. And hopefully, once you build this, it's all running on Google Cloud. So Google also sees, a reward for
Of
them
course.
because then they bill through the usage. So that's how it works because Google is not a consulting company. They're not looking forward to that business model.
Right. You're basically a forward deployed engineer without really being forward deployed
Exactly.
engineer. But
Exactly.
you're
No, I'm exactly what a forward deployed engineer is. That basically, it's very correct. That's
very
yeah.
cool. And so you're playing a lot with AI in a lot of different stack, not just Google Stack. You're doing a lot of stuff also with Claude Code. And I mean, I'm sure it's part of your role to also benchmark all the different tools and know everything that's out there. And one of the
Yeah.
projects that set out for yourself has been basically to create a Slack clone, which is a very ambitious idea. And obviously, Slack is one of these tools that's core to all of the businesses around us in the digital age. It's a tool that a lot of people love and a lot of people hate at the same time because they get swarmed by messages. And it's also a tool that gets expensive, as you had pointed out offline, when you start scaling it. So maybe you can start telling us, like, why did you decide to try to clone Slack specifically? And then, of course, I want to dive into the journey. Where did you start, the process, the bottlenecks, et cetera? But definitely want to hear more.
Yes. So all this to put in context, like I've always wanted to do side projects, but I never really had time. And I think me, like many other engineers out there, since the Claude Code and all the vibe coding came, suddenly we could do projects in a weekend, which wasn't possible before. We didn't have the bandwidth, we didn't have the,
Right.
the motivation to go on 2 month in parallel to the job. So that's one thing that, you start to see enables lots of people to do side projects. And before Slack, I even did something called PolyGPT, which was like having all the AIs, all the LLMs at the same time. You ask a question and it gives you back the answer of all those different LLMs. I'd done some series with creating animes with AI. So I was always in those side projects, but not really getting not a lot of attention on LinkedIn, let's say, but still carrying on because that's what I enjoy doing. And then I can talk about it with my friends. And cloning Slack, I had it in my mind for a while. I thought, let's see if those new tools, they are that powerful. And that's how it started. And I really didn't expect the amount of coverage I got. I had been after 2 years of doing my side project and getting 20 likes or something. Suddenly this one, for some reason, caught a lot of attention. So that's how I started. So I put in the challenge on LinkedIn, like this is what I'm going to do, to have a building in public. I think people like that, and to have like some kind of commitments to go to the end of it. Because if I do it alone, I might drop it and be like, okay, I'm not committed to anyone.
Right. And I think another part that you're not specifying is the timeline. You gave yourself a pretty aggressive timeline to clone it in 2 weeks. So 2 weeks to fully clone a product that's taken, what, 10 years to build and basically hundreds, thousands of engineers. So that's a pretty daunting task. And basically you accomplished it, right? In 2 weeks, you cloned the app, you created a public kind of repo. I don't know, actually, maybe we'll talk towards the end around where it is and, if people are continuing to build on top of it. But yeah, I think that being able to do that in 2 weeks already is a shock. And I think also you probably had a lot of people that were, how do you say, detractors who didn't want you to succeed along the
Yes.
way. So
Yeah.
walk us through that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the posts, like a lot of people are saying, yeah, doing a V1 in 2 weeks is super easy. What's hard is the long tail of stuff. You haven't copied all the features. I'm sure it's not secure. I'm sure it's not scalable. I mean, we can answer all of this. Yeah, I think that the first shock that was to people is to realize how fast you can build the core of a technology. Of course, this product is incomplete. It was maybe not a surprise to other fellow software engineers, but it definitely was to the wider public that you can build the core of an application in such a short time with the tools today. And I think that's, first of all, explains a lot of the popularity of it. So, of course, it doesn't have all the features. I think it has the 90% features people use,
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
of course,
totally.
there's a long tail of features that are used by like this customer and that customer, but honestly, it has most of the features that people use for Slack, So
Totally.
it's also about 80-20 thing,
Which, by
You
the
can
way,
get
in some
80% of the product very fast, yeah.
right. I mean, in some cases, that creates a better product, right? Because you just accumulate so many features, useless features, capabilities that also make it cumbersome and maybe hinders user experience, performance, and those type of things. So I think it's great. And I was actually talking with another friend who he argued that he thinks that some of the big companies are going to basically rebuild their apps and applications on a yearly basis from scratch just to be able to refactor and just eliminate a lot of features that people aren't using. I think that's also an interesting concept, like making these
Yeah.
applications living and breathing, basically.
I really agree with your friend, and it was something that was already occurring before the AI revolution. Often I
Right.
would see like startup founders be like on LinkedIn, oh, hey, like this month we rebuilt our entire code base because ABC. And okay, it was a bit of 1 month investment and cleaning tech debt, but it made a lot of sense. Because what happens when you code is that you start with some assumptions, and as you get more users, as your product evolves, those assumptions don't hold anymore. They're not right anymore. But the problem is your code base has been built on top of this, so you can't really change it after. In most cases, you can, but in a few cases, you can, and that's where it makes sense to basically build everything from scratch. And as you say, even take out stuff that is not necessary anymore. So I really see this in a wider trend of having an evolutionary code base that shapes to what's happening, and having AI basically constantly doing fixes, constantly updating it. Yeah.
Yep. Totally. I love that. So, okay. So this show, we're big on like not just talking and also showing and walking into like the details of like how things are built, how things are done. And so excited to dive in. Where did you start? Like, what we already talked about the fact that you used Claude Code to use this. Can you walk us through where you started, how you started thinking about building this? Did you start with the front end, the back end? Were you using various MCPs? I know you had a lot of agentic workflows you worked on. So would love to dive into that too.
Yeah, so maybe I can say a bit quickly about the other tools. Of course, there's a few tools on the market. Some people really love Codex, there's anti-gravity. For me, the one that worked best for no code, no looking at the code is Claude Code. But it's a personal experience. That's why I chose it. And then in terms of how I started building this. The first day I built the front end and the back end separately. The back end, I've talked about this, that it was easy to build it because what happens with AI is the moment you can close the loop where you don't need the human, it iterates very fast. So you give it like constraints. Okay, I want this to run at that speed. I want it to be able to do this. I want it to be secure in that way. You just leave it running and it's going to optimize and eventually converge. And it makes me think a lot about how I was training machine learning models back then with the weight. You put waves, you have back propagation, and it optimizes those weights that you don't see. You don't understand those waves, what they mean, but eventually it converges to fulfilling the validation set. And I'm sort of approaching code bases and coding with code with that mentality, that I'm not interested in the lines of code. I'm interested in this code base respecting a certain set of conditions, which is it can scale to that speed. It's not vulnerable to SQL injection. It can do that feature. It has this endpoint. So that's how I approached the backend, and it went fast. Then the front end, I did some parts. It was working. It was looking good. Then, I connected the two, and then I started to do like iterative cycles on both at the same time as one code base, basically adding features. And the way
Nathan, do you mind if I just pause you there? I just want to make sure people don't get lost. On the back end, presumably you wrote some kind of markdown file where you had all these constraints, the constraint you talked about earlier, where you listed all those constraints. You talked about performance, etc. Were there specific, like even languages or technologies you asked for, or no? Just these are more like constraints and maybe like more of a PRD. Is that the idea?
Yeah. It's true that at the beginning I didn't mention this, but I did have a bit of a planning phase where we discussed the architecture and what made more sense if with what it knows about Slack already. That's how we choose, Node.js. The database would be Postgres, with React on the front end. But all
makes
of
sense.
those it's very common stacks. I wouldn't say
Right.
it's like a crazy
Totally.
old decision to use those. It's the
Yeah,
common
totally.
stack to build
And then when you
SaaS.
say we discussed, it's just you and Claude discussing, just to be clear.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
pushing the pros and cons.
Makes
But in
sense.
the end, it went quite standard,
That makes
like
sense.
things that are well known in the literature to be
Yeah, that
the
makes sense.
go-to solution.
Okay, so that's for the back end. And then for the front end, I do, because as you said, I've been following your journey. I remember you mentioned that you had an MCP maybe in the browser where you were maybe using the web app of Slack to be able to clone the front end. Is that how you did it? Or just curious if you can dive into that as well.
Yes. So once I built the first working prototype of the app, I think that was like in day 2 or 3, there was all those bugs to fix. Like the padding isn't nice, the color isn't exactly the one of Slack, and it's very boring to go check, say, oh, this isn't like that, change it. So I was looking for a way to automate it, and then I saw in beta there was this MCP that Claude created. And there's also some open source versions of it, not related to Claude, but it's basically allows the AI agent to control your browser. They do this with computer use models. It's models that I've learned to click on computer windows. And you can just ask Claude to do it. And what it does, it connects to Chrome. And then it goes to your website, to wherever I had deployed, even locally, my app. And I also gave it a Slack workspace that I had created, like a real one. And then it had those two in 2 windows. And I told him, okay, you just compare and fix stuff. So it was just like looking at the real Slack and being like, okay, this is a little different here. There's a padding difference. Let me push it. And like that, it optimized it. I let it make them look the same,
Amazing.
That's basically
So,
it worked. And it's true that like for some subtle differences, it wasn't like human capable of seeing small subtle differences in some places. Like it wouldn't focus on that part, but it got like to 90% of the similarity, and it even better than human because it extracted the CSS code from the Slack app to put it in my app, so it even went beyond what humans could have done.
wow, that's amazing. So, okay, so you trained, and this isn't even getting into, because I also want to talk at some point about the AI architecture, and maybe not architecture, but the different agents that you put together, right? The CTO and the dev and the QA. This isn't even talking
Mhm.
about that. This isn't the QA guy. This is just like a
Yes.
front end analyst designer that's just like
Yes.
basically cloning the front end based off of the MCP that's browsing the different tabs that you have there.
Exactly. And I have a few how you say anecdotes along the way of crazy things it did. For example, at some point I saw in a commit that there was a design system.md in the GitHub. And what the agent did by its own is that somehow Slack had published their design system online, and it managed to find that, to copy the whole article about it and to put it in its repo to remember all the parameters to use, something I wouldn't have thought of doing at all. And
Wow.
this is crazy.
That's insane. That's insane. So at the end of this, I do want to show what the clone looks like so people can see the magic. But so that makes sense. So back end, front end separately, you had all the conditions in a type of PRD in an MD, a markdown file. Then you had this agent compare the two versions and iterate on the front end. What do you do from there?
Yeah, so something I didn't mention also is I used like good old tests, like test-driven development. So whenever I
Right.
was doing a new feature or something, I was first of all creating the test, making sure it fails, and then making sure after the feature is created, the test passes. Same for bugs. So there's a big set of tests in the background, but that's only like sort of, I would
Yeah.
say,
I'm sharing
bringing
my
back
screen
stuff.
here. Yeah, I'm sharing my screen just because you had explained
Yes,
some of this in this specific doc where you had a
right,
CTO
exactly.
agent and you talk about, yeah, basically TDD, use TDD, right? Playwright, test first, then implement, etc. So you gave him all these set of tasks to follow, basically,
Yeah,
best
exactly. Like
practices.
after a few days, a lot of people were asking how you're doing this. So I made this blog post to summarize, and yeah, at some point, I thought, okay, I have all those bugs to fix, etc. How do I do it? Because the thing I explained to you earlier with the front end is, okay, I'm still in front of the computer. I'm still prompting it. But at some point, I was going to sleep for like 8 hours plus all the before and after. So I was basically losing 12 hours of work every day. And I was feeling, I wasn't maximizing the potential. For example, I was saying, do this feature, and I was going to bed, and half an hour after, it was stopping with a question, oh, should I do this or that? And then it's the whole night wasted. So that's when I looked into developing a process so that it keeps working when I'm sleeping. And that's where the whole CTO dev agent came in. So what I did is I made basically two agents work in parallel. One is a QA agent. What it does is that it tests my app, and whenever it sees an issue, it opens a GitHub issue. So really like a front-end analyst, like you say, like a QA analyst. It finds something, like, okay, this shouldn't have worked this way. It opens the issue. We can even go through, I can share my screen maybe because I think it will be nice to describe that, to show this to
Sure.
the users. Share, tuk, tuk, tuk,
By the
here.
way, while you're doing this, I think that's also one of the reasons why you put these constraints. It forces you to think differently, right? If you had done this over a month, maybe you would have been slower and not think about ways to
Yes.
make it quicker. So I think that's why constraints can be so powerful.
Yes, yes, yes. I really agree with you. And that's really something that occurred to me. I was like, okay, I'm under pressure to finish this in 14 days. And if I had more time, I would probably have gone the easier, boring way. But since I was under pressure, I was like, okay, I have to find a way to make this scale. What I'm doing right now isn't scaling. That's how I had to go to the solution. So here you see there's 108 GitHub issues closed. I didn't write any of them myself. So we can take any of those. DM message ping, for example, let's take this one, doesn't update in real time across messages. And so you really see you have an AI agent here that describes the issue. After changing the profile, I think something isn't updated. It says
Amazing.
exactly the step it did to create it. It says expected behavior and actual behavior. And what I love is that I don't have to go check. It makes for me a GIF of what it tried to show me exactly what happened. So for example, here it tries to load the profile, and I think it changes something on the profile, and it doesn't get updated, if it doesn't refresh or something. So it shows you, the behavior, so you can see it's not bullshitting you. It has the
Yeah, yeah,
proof that
totally. This is amazing. By the way, just curious, did you in the prompt, did you actually ask it to take a screenshot of the bug found, or did this preemptively kind of
yes,
create a GIF? Okay,
yes, yes. No, I asked it to take a screenshot and to upload it. So this I pushed for. And I asked it also to label if it's a medium, if it's an enhancement, if it's a bug. And so that's the first part. And then I make this sort of QA agent loop. I was using cron job at the start, but then midway I realized there's a command called loop in Claude Code that allows you to make a Claude Code session keep running, keep doing stuff every 30 minutes or so. And so that's how I had this agent that's constantly looking for bugs, even when I'm asleep.
amazing.
And then in parallel, I had the dev agent that's constantly scanning for features, for issues. So here we have all the issues closed, but it's basically looking for open issues and trying to fix them. And it does it in the way that you showed earlier with the tests, the playwright tests that are like end-to-end tests using the front end. And when it's done, it basically comments on the issue and closes it. So for example, here you see it closed the issue, it references the commit that solved the bug, and then it explains how it tested and how it made sure that it's actually working now.
Amazing.
Um,
And so this is
so
all, by
it
the way,
might.
this is
Mhm.
all in a public repo that anybody can access, right?
Yes, 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 yes.
Amazing.
Because people can go this here. See, even here, that's nice because actually the dev agent that fixed, he put a screenshot to show his work that it was working now. So it's kind of nice. And, maybe sometimes it might bullshit or it might not. But honestly, for my experience, it's on par with a human level performance. Like I've had lots of dev that tell me something is fixed and then I go check and it wasn't fixed.
Right.
Um, so yeah, so that's the idea. You have those two loops,
There's
and then you have on top at the beginning, I had a CTO agent that basically would trigger one agent and then trigger the other. But I ended up removing it and just having the two working in loops, and sort of me coming in as the CTO every 12 hours, checking what's going on.
insane. Amazing. So I'm going to share also, this is the, actually, it looks pretty small. Let me try to zoom in here. This is the actual workflow that you built where you have
Mhm.
the CTO agent, the developer agent, and the QA agent. That's it. Those are the three agents you built that work basically working and collaborating continuously. Is that it?
Yes. Yes, and I've tried different layouts for doing this, and I reported on the what that worked best. This one is actually using something in Claude Code called sub-agents that for sure will be in all the other tools in the future. It's basically you let your main agent, your master agent that you talk to, you let it spawn sub-agents. You let it delegate tasks to other agents. And the way it works is it will write the prompt for the sub-agent itself, and the sub-agent will go off, run his stuff, and come back with the answer. And that's very optimal because it allows parallelism. It allows your top-level agents to trigger parallel workflows, so for speed, and it prevents context rot, like where you have too much stuff. Because your CTO agent is doing high-level stuff, like what should be the architecture, how do we scale to 1,000, 10,000 users, and then suddenly you're asking it to do stuff like how to fix the CSS button so it's closer to the padding on the left. And it's a waste of tokens to have those together in the context window. So that's really good that there's sub-agents where it can basically trigger this lower level task and never see those tokens and all this reflection and thinking. It's offloaded to someone else. And that's very useful. And then it can also do orchestration. Like now I triggered the dev agent. It reported that it implemented the feature. Now I can trigger the QA agent. So it goes check if, it was done properly. And you can, so I think those are the three basically advantages I saw in using
Amazing.
this kind of architecture.
Super, super interesting. Yeah, I am familiar with sub agents, but I haven't used them. And this is where like I'm still a noob. Like even I'm using right now Codex to build a new app that I'm working on, but I'm doing it the old way. And I need to now do your work, which is like spawning these sub agents. Although I don't know if it's available in Codex. I have to look into that. But then it just constantly works, finds bugs, iterates. And to be honest, I think for me, what I've felt like building or vibe coding these apps is that QA is really one of the bottlenecks when you start getting users that have all these bugs that you don't know why they're happening. And then just having to just manually one by one try to troubleshoot them, it's super painful. So I think what you're describing is like the future of how do you solve QA at scale, basically.
I've actually gone off on a side project now to solve this. Maybe I can show it to you. So I'm now
Definitely.
building a platform I call a QA as a service. And basically, this this QA thing, you really see that it has clear input, clear output. The input is do this task. The output is like, did you succeed? And show me a GIF of it showing that it succeeded. It's all front end based. And I was thinking I was losing a lot of time to make Claude do it. So now I created a QA as a service platform where you basically send your task and it does it and it answers to you with whether it's a fail or a pass and the different steps. It's still very early, but I think it fits well in the conversation, so I'll show you. So
For
here, for
sure.
example, I gave it a task like go to Slack, log in, etc. And then it tells you like step by step what it did. Here you see it clicked on that. Here it asked for a screenshot. Then here, wait, I think it did all those different steps to log in. So it shows you exactly,
Amazing.
that was the page. That's why I clicked. Then I typed this in there. Then I clicked here. And then so actually here you didn't click, you used tab to move to the next one. You see it here. Anyways, and at the
Interesting.
end, this is still early work, but at the end, you're supposed to get like completed. It explained like what it did, and it shows you like a full video of it doing the thing. And then you see like,
Super interesting.
and I'm thinking of scaling this where basically whenever you have a new release of your platform, you have all those hard-coded steps, all those tasks, and then, it tests like 100 features, like a real QA. It tests it on iPhone, on Android, and it reports where it saw some inconsistencies, just to speed up people vibe coding.
Amazing. Honestly, I think it's a huge blocker for people that are vibe coding that I've started to feel the pain, even though I'm not even building that much. So I can definitely see how this has a lot of value. Maybe one request for me is, so one of the apps that I'm building is actually a Chrome extension. And I found it, I don't know how to QA a Chrome extension because it's not a website, right? So it's in the browser.
Yes,
Though there's
yes.
probably an MCP, I don't know, maybe through the Claude, MCP browser, there's something to do. I'm not sure, but that's been my pain too.
Yes.
Like, how do you QA that?
Yeah, yeah, yes. So what I showed you, it's now, browser based, but I can extend it to being desktop based, meaning it sees everything. And so then
That's great.
you could tell it like create a Gmail account and go install my extension, and like show me
Oh,
the whole process, film
right.
it, tell me if you go into a roadblock, if the extension's actually working. And, if not, tell me if it is, put all of this in a video that I can show to the wider public. They have the whole user journey already ready to look at.
Right. That makes so much sense. I love that. Listen, this is what's exciting with AI. So many opportunities, and it's changing product, go to market, and all of our roles are going to be basically impacted by this in one way or another. And so it's great to be able to dive into the details. Maybe if we can go back to Slock, which for those that didn't get the wink there, that's Slock is the copy or the clone that Nathan did of Slack. First of all, maybe you can show what the end result is. And then I also want to back up a little bit and talk about your learnings and other things around, for example, maintenance, because we hear this a lot. Oh, it's easy to build. Good luck maintaining something like that. So I think that's something that I'd definitely like to get your thoughts on. You also talked about another thing that a user asked, which was, hey, Slack is great because it has all these integrations. How do you compete with that? And you had a really great response to that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So a lot of topics there. Let me address them one by one. First of all, I wanted to say what you said already that at the beginning that lots of things are going to change. I think that we haven't yet created there's a lot of products that can be created today with the level of AI we have that have not been created. And I'm thinking, about, for example, Claude Code and OpenClaw. Those things could have been created like 6 months to a year before. And I think it's touching on a subject here that it's really exciting for applied AI engineers like me today because it's like we have this untapped potential. And this is without talking about AI progressing. I'm saying that if AI stopped now at the level where it is, we would have a good year or 2 years of innovation ahead of us of how to rebuild the whole stack. So I think it's a great time to build a company and lots of untapped opportunities. And that's one thing I wanted to address. Second is Slock. We haven't talked about this, but why did I call it Slock with a W? It's because of OpenClaw that was basically trying to copy Claude code by putting this W here. So I
Love
thought
it.
it was going into the global trend. So that's why I named it this way. And then moving on to doing a demo of the app. Do you want me to show a bit how it is now?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, definitely. Definitely want to show.
okay.
I
So
was impressed when I saw it. So
yeah, so this is how it looks at the moment. You can dezoom it if it looks like a bit too close. You can talk to people. You can make a voice note. You can mention people. You can put smileys. So most of the stuff we have in Slack, you can upload. Um, Here I have an admin panel because I'm an admin, so I can manage all the people, like transfer ownership of the domain, put the role, deactivate the account, see all the channels that exist, invite new people, like create an invite link. So basically, you give them this link, and it allows them to log in into your workspace. And yeah, sometimes so I've given people outside the demo user. So sometimes I see some messages on some people. So for example, this guy connected and said, "Oh, it's very smooth." I hadn't seen
amazing.
that. I commented it. So it might be different people that posted this,
Right.
because they all have the same demo account. But yeah, that's about it. There's the people here. You can leave the account. You can leave the channel if you don't want. You can look for stuff. I don't know. Let's look Celtic. Uh, the Celtic, sorry. You can do the. Here you have the notifications. You can pin.
So
Yeah.
yeah, a couple questions. So this is only right now you
Yeah.
built a web app version, right? So it's not a native iOS app, right?
So if I share this tab, so you can have it on iPhone and Android and get notifications, but it's not an app. It's
Right.
basically
That makes
it's
sense.
it's called a PWA. It's a progressive web app. How it
Yeah.
works is that you go into Safari and you bookmark website,
Yeah,
and then
that
it
makes
becomes
sense.
like an app, which is kind of a shortcut if you're lazy developing an app.
Yep.
which I quite like because it supports push notification and it shows like an app inside your iPhone. So it's all like an app. It says you didn't have to download it.
Makes sense. And as we talked about earlier, this is an open source project, right? So anybody can come in here, fork it, or actually work on it. Are there any contributors that are actually building maybe an iOS app or other features that they're looking for? I know it's still very fresh, but curious what the kind of feedback and engagement has been.
Yeah, so I had a couple of people that pushed like a bug correction. I've one other guy who I'm talking with next week to deploy it in his company. He's interested to deploy it in AWS. And
Amazing.
I have like 250 stars, which is like a decent amount, but
Yeah, yeah, totally.
I haven't got people to start to contribute. Probably I expect this happens at 1,000 stars, or like
Right, right,
probably
right.
this is more popular.
That makes sense. And do you still have all these different agents working in the background to continue to add features and bugs, or did you say, okay, it's a set point in time, I built it, and that's it. It was just an experience, or what is the ambition with this? I know that you
Yes.
obviously have a great role at Google, and that you built this as an open source solution. Just curious where your head's at on that point.
Yeah, so definitely my goal in all of this was to do an experiment. How far can I get in 2 weeks, a hackathon with myself with this thing? And to answer a question like, do we really need to pay for all this SaaS? Do companies who have 10x engineers can just ask those engineers to do this? And because I see a lot of companies who want to empower their workforce, make them build their own tool, and they're a bit frustrated by the limitation of those SaaS. And so that was what I was trying to answer. One interesting anecdote here to put is that Google, the reason it's partly so successful and has all these products is because one of its very early policy back when it was created was to have only internal tools, no buying of other SaaS. And so I started to create Gmail, to create Google Chat, to create Google Meet, to create all those tools that it ended up reselling, in addition of customizing them to what they wanted as a company.
Right.
So I think they could do this because they had very talented engineers, a lot of money, so they could put people working on those tools. But now I'm saying that this policy can start to be applied to other companies who have less time, less money, less talented engineers because of the AI tools. And if they end up creating a crazy product that's really good, they can end up reselling it to other companies. So that was the main idea.
Interesting.
Then I created all of this, and after 14 days, what is still running? I have a security agent that's running. So basically every hour I gave it a challenge, try to crack my platform, try to break it, try to find like a security vulnerability. And so it will do that. It will find something or something that could have been, and then open a GitHub issue with the issue. And then the dev agent that's always looking out there would, pick it up and do a commit and close it. So that's one thing that's still running. But to be honest, beyond that, I'm now thinking where I want to take the project. As you said, like many people talked about the scalability. I'm really interested to build a demo where I like create a synthetic users, like create like a fake organization of 1,000 people. So think a lot of LLMs basically playing with my platform, talking to simulate like a real workspace and to show people that it's actually able to handle that load of users.
Amazing.
Because the architecture I have right now, it can handle 500 people. So it's like 100 requests per second per endpoint. But that's because I'm using the smallest machine on Google Cloud to not pay. I can buy just a bigger machine. And I think, if I buy a bigger machine and I do this simulation, I can easily do 100,000 people. And, the problem with all the naysayers is that the minute I do this, they'll move to something else. They say, okay, you cracked scalability, you cracked vulnerability. But what about this? What about that? Because what
Right.
they're really after is not creating a constructive debate and showing that AI works. They're looking to show how it fails. And it's much more an identity debate, which, like you see in the world today, a lot of people have an identity crisis and they identify to themselves to all kinds of political discourse to give themselves an identity. And I think it's a lot of the same with software engineers, where many of us, we found an identity in coding, in being software engineers. And when AI takes that away from them, it's very hard for them. And I think this is part of why there's a lot of pushback, because some people, if AI takes this away from them, it creates an identity struggle. It's very deep what I'm saying, but I really think that this is what explains the irrationality of people and how much they're pushing back on an experiment that in the end is supposed to help them do a better job, not pay for SaaS and all those kind of things.
Totally. Totally. I completely agree with what you're saying. And I think that's why it's also steering a lot of emotions, both good and bad, right? Some
Yes,
people that were following your project were super bullish and optimistic and
yes.
curious, and others were super negative and pushing back. So I just want to make sure, what is your response then to the point about maintenance, about the fact that maintenance is the hard part? I guess the first question is, to a certain extent, can you automate some of the maintenance? And so it sounds like you're doing some of this already, right? With this agent that's basically trying to look for security vulnerabilities. Obviously, you do need to continue working on the infrastructure if you want to scale the users base, et cetera. But do you think that's a real hard bottleneck for a company? I mean, I'm also looking at the parallel with, for example, CRMs, which is a world that you don't know too much, but CRM is basically where you hold all of your customer data, your client data. And I'm talking to somebody else who built their own CRM and who told me, listen, yes, we do have to work on maintenance, but we used to have somebody that would maintain Salesforce. And now we have somebody maintain our own internal product, right? So there's still resources that need to be applied, but you would anyways have somebody doing this internally. So what are your thoughts around all that and maintenance?
Yeah, totally agree with your friend. Like, even if you still need someone today, you need much less people. The trend is very clear. And it's true, I tried to do this alone. Many of the stuff people criticized, if I had two more people, they would be solved. And another thing that a lot of the software engineers commenting don't realize is the cloud. The fact that I have this experience at Google Cloud really made me understand something I wasn't fully understanding before, which is that the cloud has created so much managed services that you don't need to think so much about infrastructure anymore. You
Yeah,
have auto scalability of your DP, you have auto scalability of your endpoints on Cloud Run. And that comes from my experience in Google Cloud. And I saw a lot of people that were like senior or full stack, blah, blah, blah. They were not mentioning the cloud when they were doing this criticism. And I was really like, thinking like, do they know about this? Like, have they used the cloud enough? Because this is actually helping a lot of the vibe coding today. The cloud, you don't have to think about scalability. You don't have to think about security as much. There's still things that you can't offload to the cloud, but it's taken off 90% of this. Other people were like, yeah, your database will get erased and everything will be lost. I trust only Slack. Guess what? My database is running on Cloud SQL, which is automatically backed up by Google Cloud Platform. So you actually have people more talented than Slack that are, or even it's probable like Slack is deployed on Cloud SQL. So I'm actually using the same infra as Slack. But I'm just saying, you don't need to worry about this anymore. The cloud manages most of the stuff.
I love that you're bringing that up. I love that you're bringing it up. I've seen the same things happen because, again, I'm not technical, but it's, I have Codex setting up a lot of infrastructure for me, or I'm using Versal to basically the same thing, right? To host some of these. And there's so many tools now that allow you to just like basically maintain and scale your operations effortlessly. It's really amazing.
It's
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's even like some people were like, how do you shard your DB? I don't shard my DB like Google does it. There's so many funny questions that some people lots of people that are criticizing the AI takeover. It seems like they haven't realized the cloud takeover. Like they're like another wave behind also. They're really about doing everything themselves and it's a big waste of time.
Totally. I want to touch on two more points. So, one, integrations. Can you share also your rebuttal on integrations? Oh, you'll never be able to clone Slack. It has tens of thousands of integrations. And I think you had a really good point around this.
Yes, yes, yes. So yeah, I hope I'll have time to not tell it but show it effectively, or this thing that you said and all the things before. The idea is that Slack was built before AI and where it was really important to have interconnectedness between all those different. What we're seeing now with OpenClaw is that you only need one integration per platform, and basically an entry point for your agent. And so how I see the Slack of tomorrow is that instead of having 400 integration, you have one, which is an MCP server that allows your OpenClaw or your agent or your work claw to talk with it. And so any basically things you need to do between apps would go through your agent. So you don't need the amount of integration of every application to every other application. You only need one to your agent. So for example, I want an integration between Gmail and my Slack. So I would just have my talk to my agent in Slack and be like, yeah, can you check this email and write the content in this channel? So it would send that request to the agent that would go out of Slack, use the Gmail CLI, the Gmail MCP to get the email, and then
Exactly. Yeah.
send it back into Slack. I also think I don't need to build all those integration, and I think it's also a good opportunity with this clone to rebuild things from scratch and to show it's not needed anymore. And this connects to something I wanted to say, which is the Slack of tomorrow, I think you can make it with an AI agent at the center of it that controls everything. And maybe if I have time, this is something I will try to do as a follow-up to this experiment. It's to move away from the clone and start, building something new, which is the Slack of tomorrow, which would be, how can I say, natively AI, where like most of the stuff you used to have to click to do, you can now do it with an AI. So for example, you don't click schedule a message, you tell your AI, send this message at this time. So removing all those buttons, all those features that you lost into, and having, sort of one agent that you talk to, and it tells you what it can do.
Love that. I think that's an AI first Slack is direly needed
Exactly.
for sure. I think there's so much potential there. And I think what you said, I think makes a lot of sense where basically your AI agent is going to look up the tools it needs, integrate with them automatically, and just do these things on the fly versus having these old API integrations that need to be maintained, etc. It's a new world. It's a completely new world, new
It,
paradigms.
it's a new world, and it's too hard for established companies like Slack to say, let's build a new platform. Let's build from scratch. Or it's too hard for them to say, let's erase those features because they have customers using it, etc. So I think this can only come from an incumbent.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm on holidays right now, so maybe I'll have time to dive
To
back into
explore
this.
for sure.
Once I finish the QA as a service POC, probably I go back into this. And I think you had a question about maintenance. I wanted to address it quickly. At the moment, as I told you earlier, if you just open a GitHub issue, the dev agent will fix stuff. So right now, maintenance is not a big issue for me. Fixing stuff is not an issue. Finding the bugs is the issue. That's time consuming. And that's also why I like having users, because they help me find it out in addition to what the user didn't find out. But I don't think like maintenance is a topic anymore. Like this or this doesn't work. As soon as you explained what doesn't work, the AI is already onto a fix to make it work. So the
Right.
bottleneck is actually finding the issue.
Totally. And I guess this is a bit of a sidetrack, but do you think that, so obviously you're building now this other tool to be able to identify bugs. Do you think though that we, going back to testing, do you think that we still need humans also to test? And I know that there's also been agents that hire actual humans to actually do the testing for them sometimes. So
This is great.
do you think there's combination of, obviously there are some things that you maybe can't reproduce as well, or that humans just do differently because we're not logical, or so do you think there's still a need for both?
Yeah, for sure, because AI fails in very subtle ways, like I told you, like padding or this, and it's
Right,
probably like those extra 20% it doesn't do. And those 20% will turn to 10% and will turn to 5%, but it will never disappear to zero. It's the long
right.
tail of, AI not being exactly like us. So I definitely think an human is needed. And I would love to have this service where, finish my app and I'm about to launch it. And I remember in my startup, all the company was under stress. We were like everybody checking all the stuff everywhere. We are all doing QA. It was annoying and boring. And I would love that I can just be like, this is the link to my app. I'm about to release it tomorrow. Test it in every possible ways, find bugs. And basically someone to come back with a list. Because right now, the way people do this is if they didn't find it, their users will find it. And I
Yes,
want to try
100%.
to not get to that step. So that would be awesome if we could have something like that. And even QAs, I think the job of QA isn't dead. It's just going to evolve. It's just they're going
Totally.
to use all those QA tools to test much. It's just a QA is going to be a 10x QA. It's going to be able
Right,
to do the work of 10 QAs now.
right.
But I really expect that software engineers are going to ship more and going to ship faster as well.
Totally.
So
Super interesting.
so
But
maybe it
by the
will
way,
balance out.
yeah, we talk a lot about QA. And again, I'm telling you that for the app that I launched, I had
Mm.
all of my friends, literally, including a lot of people from our old work, that have tried it out, gave me feedback. It would crash with them, and I'd be so thankful for their patience. But yeah, it's just very hard. The more you start releasing, the more you need to QA. So that becomes a bottleneck, which is a really interesting point.
Exactly. Each time you add a feature, you need to see, does it work this feature after that
Totally.
feature? It's
Totally.
it's exponential. So definitely need for parallelism and automation there.
Yeah. So maybe we'll have you back when you have this new QA app that you're building as well.
Stuff,
Maybe
yeah.
last point around this is a small point, but just around the cost of this. So you had Cloud Code. You said you also were using like a Google Cloud service that was free. I'm assuming you had what Cloud Code Max. So you're spending like $100 a month on that. What about like tokens, et cetera? Did it cost you a? Do you know approximately how much this whole project cost you?
Yeah, it cost me $200. I started with
Amazing.
Cloud Code Max, which is $100,
Right.
5x the casual amount. When I started to run all those agents in parallel, I started to hit my limits at night. When I was sleeping, the agent was hitting limits. So I upgraded
Right.
to the pro, and then that's it. That was enough. So I never spent more than
Amazing.
that. And it was in 2 weeks. So, it means I have money for another 2 weeks of project. So it's really not 200. It's the $100 if you
A
divide
hundred
the
dollars,
pro rata.
right? Wow. Wow, that's amazing.
It's
Really
totally
great.
worth it. I've, yeah, even if it was $500, it would be worth it. It's very cheap.
Totally. No, I think it's just helpful to give people a context around how much this all costs. Nathan, this has been a really fascinating conversation. I think so. In the show notes, I'll share the GitHub repo and all the projects around that, maybe the blog post you had shared. Where can people find you? Is the best place to find you on LinkedIn and basically connect with you there?
Yeah, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I reply to everyone. I can't necessarily have a meeting, but I can definitely have a chat in DMs, like no problem.
Amazing, amazing. Any final thoughts, parting notes, things that I might have forgotten before we leave this there for now?
I think I fit a lot of the stuff I wanted to explain about this project. I was very passionate about it. I want to say that the thing I want to get at in the end with all of this is to show that people like you that not necessarily have learned computer
Yeah,
science can code their app end to end. I mean, that's my dream at the end of the day, that you
right,
can build your app that will be completely secure, completely scalable. And I think if we can do this, basically right now only 1% of the people can innovate, like people who know how to code. But
right.
if we're able to get to that level of, and we are already with many apps like Lovable, etc., they're Replit, they're trying to do this. I think we're gonna get really a tsunami of software, like I said, and I think that's a very good thing.
Totally. I think it's a great thing. And I think really what these sessions are about is really going into the details, breaking down how you do it. And I think what you've accomplished is really amazing. Obviously, you are technical, but as you said, you didn't actually look at like a specific line of code or fix any bugs yourself. You orchestrated this agentic system that was fixing things on the fly for you, and you were basically coordinating all that on your side, obviously, but didn't have to go into the details, which is amazing and fascinating. So very, very cool. Thank you for sharing this. We'll be following along your journey. It would definitely be great to hear that people are picking it up and iterating on this open source project. And yeah, we will be back in touch. Thanks again for joining the podcast, Nathan.
So awesome. Thank you, Shah. It was a pleasure.